These are more solutions to the study guide for the Chapter 1 test. So let's take a look at number 15 here. It asks us to add or subtract or multiply or divide multiple mixed numbers. And so you're going to have some problems that have this concept in there. We're going to have to deal with more than one mixed number. So I'm just going to follow what order of operation says, and I'm going to work inside the parentheses here. And I'm going to double this number here. So when I'm doubling this number, I am taking that 40, I'll start with just rewriting that 48.5, and I'll rewrite that. And now I'm going to double both the 13 and the quarter. So I'm going to double both of those values. So I'm doubling the 1/4. So when I double that, it's just multiplying 2 times 1, or you could do some reducing. And so that ends up leaving me with 1/2. And then if I double 13, that leaves me with 26. So doubling 13 1/4 is just 26.5. Bring down that plus 6 1/3, and I bring down the minus, and then 48.5. Well, when I've got multiple numbers like this, I usually like to go ahead and combine the two positives, and then, or how many ever positives I have, and then combine the negatives. So I'm going to combine these two right here. So when I do that, I'm going to take the 48.5 and the 16 1/3, I'm going to come up with a common denominator. So I'm going to multiply that 1/2 by 3/3 and the 6 1/3 by 2/2. So what I'm really doing is doing 48 and 3/6, and I'm adding on the 6 and 2/6. When I do that, that leaves me with 5/6, and then I have to add the 48 and the 6, and that gives me 54. So from this point, what I'm going to end up doing is subtracting the 26.5. So rewrite that 54 and 5/6, subtract the 26 and 1/2. So I got to come up with that common denominator again, and to multiply the 1/2 by 3/3, and leaves me at 3/6. So now I'm ready to do the subtraction, and I'm all set up for it, because when I go ahead and do it, I've got the 5/6 being bigger than the 3/6, so that gives me 2/6, and the 54 minus the 26, I've got to borrow a little bit, and that leaves me with 14 minus 6 makes 8, 4 minus 2 makes 2, so 28 and 2/6. However, we can just take out that common factor between these two numbers, and that leaves me, taking out the 2 here and the 2 here, it leaves me with 28 1/3 as the answer. Well, looking at our next one, it talks about how stock market or something goes up 6.5 points. So up means positive, and then down means negative, so 4 2/3. And then it goes up 2 1/6. So what they want us to know is they just want us to total the numbers, see how much it went up or down. So what we're going to do from this point is combine these two terms right here. So I'm going to come up with a common denominator, multiply that 1/2 by 3/3. So now I've got 6 and 3/6, and I'm going to add on the 2 and 1/6. So when I add those, I end up with 8 and 4/6, which can reduce. So there's a common factor there. I can take out a common factor of 2, and that leaves me with 8 and 2/3. Well, it says that I need to subtract the 4 and 2/3. So when I do that, the 2/3 are going to cancel. 8 minus 4 leaves me with 4, and that would be my answer. Well, the next problem is very similar, except it's already kind of set up for us. I'm going to just combine these two terms here. So I'm going to come up with that common denominator, multiply the top and bottom there by 5. So I've now got 42 and 5/10. Then I'm adding on 8 and 7/10. Well, when I add those numbers, I get something bigger than a regular fraction. I get 12/10. And when I add these numbers, I end up with 50. So I have to divide 10 into 12, and that goes in there one time. So I'm going to have 51 and 2/10, which would just reduce down to 51 and 1/5. But we're not done yet. We need to take away the 12 1/3. So now I've got this to set up. 51 and 1/5. I need to take away 12 and 1/3. So when I do that, I've got to come up with a common denominator. I'll multiply the 5 by 3, so I'm left with 3/15. And over here, the 1/3 I need to multiply by 5, so I've got 5/15. So when I look at that, I can't quite subtract this way because the 5 is bigger than the 3. So I need to borrow. So I'm going to end up borrowing from the 51, change it to 50, and then I need to add on 15/15. So when I do that, that leaves me with 18/15. And now I can go ahead and set up the subtraction. So when I do that, 5 from 18 leaves me with 13/15. And I do 50 minus 12, so make sure you borrow correctly here. And 10 minus 2 leaves me with 8. 4 minus 1 gives me 3. So 38 and 13/15 is the answer. So let's take a look at our next one here. So on the back side, they ask us to solve some equations. So that's what we're going to do here. The whole idea is to get the variable by itself. So I need to subtract that 6 3/10. The trouble is, in order to do the subtraction correctly, I need to make sure the bigger number is on top. Otherwise, I might make an error. In this case, I don't have to worry about borrowing because the numbers on top are bigger than the numbers on the bottom. But the answer is negative because I'm taking away more than what I started with. Well, negative 2 1/10 equals a negative y. Make sure you bring the sign down in front of the term. So from this point, we're going to divide or multiply by a negative 1, and it'll switch the signs. So now we've got 2 1/10 as the value of y. Well, the next one, we're going to go ahead and subtract the 18 from all sides. And so once I've done that, I'm now left with a negative 2/10 x, and it equals negative 8. Notice again, I'm bringing down the sign in front of the term. So from this point, I need to divide by negative 0.2, or negative 2/10. Whenever you divide by a decimal, we move the decimal in the divisor over. Do the same with the dividend. That means adding that 0. So off to the side, we've got 2 into 80, which ends up going 40 times. So x is 40. Notice how the two negative signs are going to cancel. Negative over negative makes a positive. Well, this next one, I got to isolate the variable, so that's why I'm moving the 8 2/10 to the right-hand side. And once I've done that, do the subtraction to make sure, again, you're bringing down the signs. So bringing down that negative sign along with the 1 5/10 x, and this all equals, we have 1 5/10. So we're ready to do the division here. And when I'm dividing, just be careful of the sign. Make sure you divide by the negative because we have a positive over a negative. Obviously, the numbers are the same, so it equals 1, but it's going to be negative 1 because of the 1 negative sign. Looking at the next one, we're going to subtract that 5/100 from both sides. Now, again, make sure you line up the decimal points and add the 0 because you'll end up making an error if you don't. You'll have to borrow, and we have 3 5/100 left over equals x over 4 1/10. So from this point, we're going to multiply by the 4 1/10. Do the same on the other side, and this is what we get. Now we've got the 4 1/10 canceling, so we've got x equals, and then off to the side we should set up our multiplication so we get the right answer. So we're multiplying by 1, and that doesn't change any of the values. And I carry a 0 down because I moved over a place value, and I multiply. And so when I do the last step, I'm going to add these numbers together. So that gives me 5, 0, 5, 2, and a 1. So the decimal point goes 3 spaces to the left because there are 3 numbers after the decimal point. So 12 505 thousandths. Let's make sure we got the sign right. Looks like it's a positive times a positive, so it is a positive. And it kind of makes sense. This is about 3, this is about 4. 3 times 4 is 12, so it makes sense. Well, let's take a look at the next one. We're going to subtract the 9 from all sides. Careful on the signs here. When we have the same sign like this, these are the same sign we add. So same sign, add. That's my rule. So that ends up making negative 13 equals a 1/2 x. So from that point, we're going to multiply both sides by 2 to get those 2's to cross cancel. Do the same thing on this side. Again, that was 2 over 1. It's the same thing, but it shows you how those 2's end up cross canceling a little better. So x equals negative 26 in this case. And looking at our next one here, we've got a 8 that we're going to end up having to add to both sides. And so when I add that 8, I'm still left with this 1/3 x. But now notice that the signs are opposite. So when we have opposite signs mean subtract. So that means we're going to take away, and we look to see which one's further from 0, and it ends up being a negative 6. And so from that point, we're going to end up multiplying by the reciprocal. And so let's go ahead and do that. So we'll multiply by 3/1 to cancel out the 3's. And so when I do that, I end up having to do the same thing on this side. And when I multiply by that positive 3, not negative, so let me go ahead and fix that. So multiplying by positive 3, I end up getting a negative answer though. Negative 6 times 3 gives me negative 18. That would be our solution. So those are problems that you'll end up seeing on that set. There's one extra set, which is the performance task that you can check out on part 3.